Welcome to the third episode of Creator Spotlight from the Interface. My name's Alex, and today I'm joined by special guest Tom Lawrence from Lawrence Systems. He runs his own consultancy business as well as a YouTube channel, which you may have seen. So welcome, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
This is always fun, getting to meet new people, interviews, and talking about some of the behind the scenes of making things.
Yeah, definitely. The Creator Spotlight podcast is something I started from my blog as well. It's sort of I talk to people that make stuff basically. So anyone that makes YouTube stuff, any blogs, anyone that just all day makes stuff, and then we talk about how they got started and what they do and the nuts and bolts about making things. So it's always interesting to talk to people that make stuff. So
yeah, and I think some people do have a plan.
Yep.
Mine was less planned. Mine was more serendipitous of how I got here. I didn't sit down one day and draw a business plan. I just slowly iterated towards I should make some things and put them on YouTube, because I already did public speaking. I already did some of these other things, but YouTube was the first time I used my skills for teaching, if you will, towards actually teaching people at scale. I've talked at plenty of Linux conferences and things like that, but you only reach so many people, and only so many people fit in a room when you're doing those.
Yeah, definitely. YouTube's such an important resource, really, and especially in the networking space. There's only really, in the Ubiquiti space as well, there's only really 3 or 4 people that, it's you and a few other people that do this sort of thing. So you get quite a nice, when everyone comes to YouTube for Ubiquiti stuff, they always it's you and Chris and Cody and that sort of thing.
And that's the strangest thing to me, that this small group of people, this small handful of us that talk about these things on YouTube, the part that always surprises me is like the scale at which Ubiquiti operates, the millions of devices they sell, the demand for their product, the niche they have in the market. But there's these couple guys on YouTube. That's where you learned about them from. Like that's always just like a weird juxtaposition to me. I mean, there's other people talking about some of the other products that are kind of niche as well. But Ubiquiti is one of the ones that really stands out, because, I mean, to call it niche is kind of not really giving it its due for just how big of a product base and install base they have, not just with home lab people, but, well, businesses as well.
It's interesting to see where it's come. So quite a while ago, I used to work at a WISP in the UK, and we used to use Ubiquiti stuff all the time. And then it was sort of I remember using the forums in those days. It was a little smaller than it felt a lot smaller than it is now.
Yeah,
and all the employees were on the forums and doing things. So it's definitely exploded in the last 4, 5, 6 years. It's mental. So
yeah, and this is where some of the stuff comes in for me and the other people that make content on there. There's just a lack of documentation they have on things. Mm-hmm. It's a concept that doesn't sit well with a lot of the enterprise space. The fact that, well, how'd you learn how this works? Well, there's a guy in YouTube did a video about it. Why would I watch YouTube videos? Don't I get a support contract and an agreement and a whole engineering team to support the product? Well, no, not with Ubiquiti, but that's the trade-off. I want a price that's affordable. I don't want license fees that are outrageous. So I guess I got to watch this guy on YouTube, and that's going to be how you save that money.
or figure out yourself and spend quite a little while working out how it works. But
yeah, that too. And it really comes down to my background as a network engineer made Ubiquiti easy for me to learn, because they're not the only piece of gear that I know. I know other kit. I know some of the Cisco's and just a variety of other equipment I've used over the years, HP ProCurve and things like that. Once you have your base network concepts down, you can kind of keep learning and expanding from there. It's kind of like when you learn multiple programming languages. Yeah, they're different. Yeah, they have some structural differences and some changes in the way they word things. But once you kind of get the concept, you're like, okay, I get this, and I can kind of figure it out.
Definitely, yeah. It's I've noticed. So with the YouTube channel, so you got and I mentioned that it wasn't always the plan to do a YouTube channel, and you mentioned that I think you said going back before 2017.
Yeah, I just had a few videos on there and a few firewall videos, and the way that came about was because I was speaking at an event, and it was a Linux conference, and I was talking about PfSense firewalls, and I think this was probably 2015 or so. And not the first time I've done that type of speaking engagement, been doing that for a very long time, but it was the first time someone said, hey, can you put that on YouTube? And I was like, I probably could put that on YouTube. And so it's just, it seems technically feasible. I've built this slide deck and have a presentation. It goes for about 45 minutes. That could be turned into a video. Matter of fact, as I kind of went along, I was like, I can make it longer. I can put more detail in there. And so that's why
Mm.
some of my earliest videos that I didn't realize there was a demand for. And this is where you don't know with YouTube if there's a demand for something or if you're the one helping to create the demand for it. When you start putting these videos out there, and people start watching it, one, you're excited, but two, more people want to put more firewall videos. And people have this view of YouTube as a competitive space when in reality it's a collaborative space. It's just
Hmm.
like when the latest iPhone that just came out. It's funny because one of the YouTubers had a health issue, so he didn't cover it. And he talked about how many times people pinged him for not covering the latest iPhone, which he's by far not the only person covering the latest iPhone. And it's just the way you think about it. When a new product or something you want to teach someone's out there, it's usually not a perspective someone wants. People like all the angles, all the perspectives, and it almost seems like they can't get enough of it. So what's really started happening is I'm maybe one of the early people dumping out a lot of this information on there. But as I did it, more people come to the platform that left the opportunity for more and more people to do it. So as they started dumping things to the platform, I think there's over the last 5 years, this network engineering ecosystem you can find on YouTube that just didn't exist before. And it really didn't, you would have had to fly around to a lot of different conferences and things like that to get to it. It was just not the most practical way to get knowledge on everything.
Yeah, I watch a lot of videos from you, Chris, and coding stuff, and then I've started seeing on my YouTube homepage now lots of other creators I've never heard of before that are doing Ubiquiti stuff as well. There's a couple of guys in the UK that are doing stuff, and they do some good stuff. So there's a lot of people sort of jumping on it and talking about the cameras and different things. It's great.
Yeah, and with the absolute amazing number of products they have, Ubiquiti being an
Yeah.
example, but you can really it's not even enough time for a single creator to try to monopolize it. If I hired 20 people, it would be a full-time production just to dedicate to Ubiquiti videos. I could do that. I can make a lot, but boy, it'd be hard to cover everything. So I bounce around just like other people do between what's interesting to me, and I let other
Yep.
people, so to speak, cover the gaps. Or sometimes we cover the same thing. Like when new releases come out, the releases Ubiquiti has I think it's on purpose, a mysterious way they release things. They give you the
Hmm.
most vague details, like fixed this or added, enhanced that, but don't really
Yeah.
tell you what that is in detail. So you almost need someone to kind of help decipher
Go
it.
in and have a look.
It
Yeah.
becomes a fun challenge for me and the other people that review, like just when releases come out, we really have to stare at it, and we do talk to each other behind the scenes as well. I reach out to Cody or Willie or Chris from Crosstalk or any of the other people, and we'll message back
Yep.
and forth about the things we're seeing that are changes. Do you notice this? And they sometimes go, did you notice this? And you're like, oh yeah, look, that menu moved over, because they're so vague on their the release notes tell you if there's a bug fix, then that's going to be more implicit. But feature releases are kind of like they just shuffle things around, and I don't know. I think that kind of leads to, they know that it'll get the views, so Ubiquiti does it. That will lead me and other people to make these videos that we know will get the views, and
Yep.
ultimately it helps Ubiquiti. It helps us. So it's kind of a fun ecosystem when you think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So from the videos I've watched from you, I got the impression that you've got a physical shop as well,
Yes.
essentially like a drop-in shop sort of thing.
Mhm.
Is that called PC? That's called PC Pickup, isn't it? Or is that
Well,
different?
that's what we used to call it. So depending on when
Okay.
you watch the videos, and this is really, I think there's this fun thing about putting content on the internet.
Hmm.
The old expression, you never get another chance to make a first impression, except anytime you watch a video, that is the first impression you have of me, like the video I
Yeah.
released in 2017 or a video in 2016. And yes, we did have a retail store we called PC Pickup that we actually closed in 2019. People thought we closed
Okay.
it because of the pandemic in 2020. I'm like, no, we just decided we didn't want to do retail anymore. So we wound it all down at the end of 2019, which is perfect timing for the events
Yep.
that occurred in 2020 for not
Yep.
wanting to have the
Definitely.
general public in there. We just got so busy with the business thing. So it is correct to say, but it kind of it was one of those things that needs time added to the context of things,
Yep.
because my old videos are still relevant for the things I talked about then. But I may have mentioned in some of those old one my retail store, which no longer exists here. It's the same physical building though.
Yep.
My employees have some signs that say "Do not enter" and things like that. They just don't want people wandering in anymore. Actually, they lock the doors
Yeah, makes sense.
sometimes when there's no
Oh well.
deliveries.
Yeah, you've also moved your. I noticed you moved your studio as well. So you used to be
Yes.
in that back different kind of room with a TV behind you, and you had that little device we could switch the views on the
Yeah.
videos as well. So I think you've moved into a different area now, which
Yeah,
is
I
looks
built
quite
a new
nice. So
studio. So the first studio build was 2017, and it slowly went through iterations of
yep,
different ways I wanted to record. There were different spots in my building that we have my business in that I record. As my company's expanded, I've kind of run out of room for me being there and the studio being there. Studio took up a lot of space. It's kind of a lot of things to have all the cameras and microphones and stuff. So I finally, we'd built a new house that's relatively close, and I built a dedicated studio spot where I'm recording from right now at my house. It's a pretty big space. So this gives me, more time to work on things without being disturbed, so to speak, where I could just on
yep,
any time, and I deal with people in different time zones, so it's kind of fun I don't have to leave the office or meet someone at the office when I'm doing a podcast in Australia. I can just turn it on here. I've done a few
yep.
things with different Australia clients in Australia, and their time zone is so different. So not having to try to work that out and driving back over to my office, doing it all from home just makes life easier.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. The other thing you do is you obviously do you have customers that aren't virtually. I guess you have customers that you go out and build stuff for. So
Yes.
how does the whole process work for getting clients to getting clients and then competing for work, and
So
is
that's an
that quite a
interesting
challenge or
way we started doing that. This is also very serendipitous. It wasn't very planned, and it came from marketing friends and people that are much more business savvy than myself saying,
hmm
"Hey, why don't you advertise yourself on your channel?" Because I was debating about, what do I want to do for sponsorships and things like that. So I started just kind of sponsoring myself, and I don't think I really started doing that until 2019. So there's like all these videos I was making, but I never really suggested. I'm trying to remember exactly when. Maybe it was in 2019, earlier, somewhere around then. You'll notice it popped up that it says hire us on there. And all it is I do a tutorial. I don't leave anything out. I don't partially do a tutorial and tell you to hire us to find it. I still lay it all out there.
yeah,
And there's that myth that constantly gets repeated by usually people older than me. Oh, if you tell them how to do it, they won't hire you, which actually isn't true. There is someone out there who's determined to figure something out, who is never going to hire me, that will keep watching tutorials and reading tutorials until they figure it out. They were never going to be my customer. So that person's ruled out. But by putting it out there, there's those who do. They look at it and go, wow, that looks complex. And it's the same thing with myself. I watch YouTube videos on how to build something at my house. Sometimes I look at it and go, that seems like a task I could accomplish. Sometimes I look at it going, wow, that was way harder than I expected. I would love to hire that person to do that. So by
definitely.
putting it all out there with the offer to hire us, a lot of, especially businesses and commercial companies, reach out to us for consulting on these things. And it becomes a good relationship because we work with mostly, because the people who consume my content are internal IT people or people,
Yeah,
they're either a solo administrator, or we have a couple large companies where we're dealing with the entire team internally, coordinating with them on a project. Because if you're an internal IT team, you don't always do the heavy lift of swapping servers. You only do that every time there's a server refresh. You just do maintenance from time to time. So because a lot of us my videos are discussing how to set up a server, you get this customer going, I watched how to do it. I'm not ready to make all those changes. I'll just hire a company to come in and do it and then hand the keys over to them. So that's kind of the business plan, if you will, for how we get business on there. And it's a solid system. It generates a lot of leads for us, and it has me expanding the company, and we do the consulting all over the place. So it's not limited even just to the United States. We do it pretty much globally, anywhere. The only thing we
yeah,
can't really do when it comes to global is we do travel to places, but we have that restricted to the US. So on occasion, there's need for us to physically help with things, and we'll send a team out there. But it has to be within reason. It has to be, generally speaking, we haven't really decided if we want to leave the United States, because I think it just can create too many logistical. It's hard enough sorting out canceled flights and
yeah.
things like that here in the US, but once you start leaving the US, I think it's only going to get more complicated. So
It
we
just
only
adds
stick to
another
the US.
complication. Yeah,
Yeah, remotely we can work
yeah,
anywhere though. We have a few clients we do some design consulting for, specifically Australia. I mentioned there seems to be a pretty growing movie business there, and movies are big, so that means they buy a lot of storage servers. So we have done a lot of consulting around that topic.
yeah. That's great. Yeah, once you start going international outside your home country, things like payments and different things gets quite complicated. So
Yeah.
it's probably a sensible decision.
Yeah, it's just sticking with it. Now, as far as like, because the way we do we're using different tools like Stripe and things like that, really simple, common tools. They take care of all the payment stuff for us for that. It's always presented in whatever their currency is. So I don't always know what the conversions are. I know what it is for us, and it's a static amount. This is what we want to buy block hours and things like that. And I let the internet has really become so easy to use and all these different tools that I don't even have to think about that. Like this was stuff years and years ago, over 20 years ago when I worked my earlier tech career. I remember we did a lot of international shipping. There was always like this calculation we had to do. I remember actually having well, not me, but people there calling the bank to figure out conversion rates to send money. And this was like in the 90s. I'm like, that just sounds hard. You actually have to call the bank, find the current rates so you could set the prices, so you could do this. It was like a process that I wasn't deeply involved in, but like I look it over and go, that seems hard. I want to go back to networks.
I never knew that. I never knew that was a thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
crazy.
it's just accepted. It's on the internet now. You don't have to think about it. But when you're doing bank clearings and wiring money internationally, you had to know the rates or whatever. It was details that, like, it's so far in the past. It's funny how the world has changed. I was laughing when someone pointed out that how we used to print maps to go places. I'm like, yes, we did. I remember before we could even print maps, you just bought lots of maps and you had to make notes on how to do things. When MapQuest came out, that was huge. Like you could actually print the map because there's no, in 1999, there was no mobile data platform where I could have my car navigate me very easily. So when I traveled to different places, you just had maps and written directions.
It's crazy. I don't think I could get around without some sort of phone to tell me where to go. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
My kids were impressed that they weren't impressed at first when I was talking about one of my first jobs was pizza delivery, and that would have been in 1994. I used to deliver pizzas, I said, but think about it. There was no maps, there was no things. You had to memorize all the streets, all the addresses, and how to get there. And they had a big giant map on the wall, so you stared at it, and it was kind of like, I don't know, the grid to this day of all the places I delivered pizzas in the early 90s or mid 90s is still in my head. I still know every address to those cities, and if you give me any address, I'll tell you the cross streets that it's at. I committed to memory, and for some reason that has not fallen out of my memory.
Yeah, that's it's not something I've experienced, but yeah.
Yeah, it is such a different world.
I know.
It's fun.
Yeah. So we mentioned Ubiquiti at the start, but there's also it's also something you're doing more recently. It's PfSense and other bits and pieces from other companies that do routing.
Yeah.
PfSense is not something I've used before. So could you sort of give an overview of roughly what that is and where it's come from?
PfSense, quick history is it started. There was the Monowall project, and then Monowall, when they I think it was in 2006 or 7, Monowall was forked into PfSense. It was all BSD based firewalls. One of the reasons these were based on BSD, and it's a joke I've repeated, is basically BSD always did it first. Linux always does it better. So firewalls in BSD were the scalable replacement for some of the early days of data centers that they all ran. This is, if you go into the ISP world, and some of the big hosting companies in the early days pretty much all ran BSD. They had just really solid, and Linux can do this now, but the way the PF filter worked allowed you to really manage firewalls well. But the Monowall project was really popular, so when the maintainer gave it up, PfSense took it over. And then from there, and in the early days, I was a Linux admin and managed a lot of servers. So firewalls that were built on open source are just in general more flexible than the firewalls you used that were at the time, Cisco's and things like that. So I was an early adopter of all this. And back then that was like blasphemy. Everyone just bought Cisco and used the same things, or, even SonicWalls and some of the other early firewalls, which many of them are still around today. But the software defined firewall world was getting going and was so niche at the time. But because I was an early adopter of it, that made me extremely familiar with it. Come back all the way till present day, when software defined firewalls are pretty much how all of them are. They all run on either a Linux or BSD distribution. Even Juniper's are BSD based. most of the other ones are going to be Linux based, a lot of popular brands. So yeah, the history of PfSense is interesting. And because I was there using a lot of these different tools for so many years, this is where I've done a lot of talking and expertise long before my YouTube channel. So it was kind of a natural fit. And that's why I mentioned some of the first videos I did were a lot of PfSense videos, are my earliest videos.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think I'm right in saying the guy, is it Chris B? I can't pronounce his last name. But I think somebody from that company came from there and is now in the team doing the USG, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
interesting when that person came over, but everyone's like, oh no, because there's always this thing with a lot of the open source stuff where when a team is working together and someone leaves that team, or there was a lot of assumptions, I should say, made that this would be the end of PfSense. And the reality is PfSense has gone right on. And the skills that person may have brought to the firewalls with the Ubiquiti, the firewalls Ubiquiti, as we all know, are been painful to use because they're just missing so many normal expected features. Even though Ubiquiti throws the word enterprise on them, the fact that you can't do VPN policy routing easily and things like that it's just got gaps that they don't have. Not to mention, I did the video that I think Ubiquiti was less than pleased with, but it was called the weird way VPNs are implemented inside of Ubiquiti, because they don't follow what any other firewall does, but they're not doing it better. They're doing it weird and difficult for users. I know there's a new version coming out as of we're recording this right now in September of 2022. Yeah. I know there's a new version coming out that's supposed to remedy some of the ways they implemented WireGuard, and hopefully they do. I mean, I'm not here just to slam on Ubiquiti and tell you that PfSense is better. I deal with real world business use cases, and if the business can't get the functionality out of a device without some random GitHub project where you cobble together some scripts to make it do the thing you want, that's hard to support. And ultimately, when I do a lot of these, I always think about, because most of what I'm doing is business consulting, so I always think about what's not just for the home lab people, but what's the supportable, supported way of doing these type of setups.
Yeah, because generally, if something doesn't work quite well and a customer's not as technical, it looks like it's your fault basically sometimes.
Yeah, so it comes down to, I mean, just because I can set up a GitHub script to make WireGuard work on my Unified Dream Machine Pro, what does that look like from a business use case if I got to replace it or have people to muddle through it, or if an update breaks my extra add-on that's unofficially supported? I don't knock people who want to tinker. Matter of fact, I love when people want to tinker. I think it's a lot of fun. It's how we learn. But there's learning, and then there's, hey, I got to deploy these at the almost 100 businesses that we have a contract to manage, and they expect everything just to work and updates to update without breaking things. So
yeah,
no one wants things down.
There was an update for the UXG Pro. Was it last week? I think it was last week.
Yeah, I think last week.
It added quite a nice amount of stuff. It added stuff from the UDM SE, I think, to the UXG Pro. So I think you got Open VPN client support as well, and also some, I can't remember what there was. So Open Client VPN, some other teleport stuff as well. So it seems like that project was weird, to be honest. It was sat in beta for so long.
Yeah, like over a year, I think it was in beta.
It was 2 years. That was
2 years. Okay, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, it's a very long time.
It got announced in like 2020, and then just randomly got released. It was just out of stock for ages, and then but it looks like it's getting there. I think it's an interesting product, but
yeah, it's a challenge, and this is where Ubiquiti makes it hard on themselves. That, hey, and I've mentioned this in the videos too, if only there was a roadmap for your product. I can't buy products based on what they might do, but the reality is Ubiquiti barely even tells us, outside of looking ahead at the beta, which isn't very far ahead at all, what is going to be the product's future. Something being in beta for 2 years, then being released, and then we're only maybe a month out from a beta that tells us that looks like we're going to get some OpenVPN support. Well, that's hardly enough planning for you to actually plan and implement things. I mean, we have clients right now. We're doing a business that has locations all over the U.S., and we're building out all new firewalls for them. And they started with wanting to go Ubiquiti, and we did tell them it's neat, But, the auto route building and everything is okay until it doesn't. The lack of policy routing was one of the killers because they have not just everything can go across all the VPN. And this is where you got to have like a plan. So they all went with PfSense because it's just easier to implement. It has a more predictable path for how we'll get there for setting things up. So that's
Yeah.
but then again, this is what creates more content. People, there's a video that can be done now on the new
Yeah,
USG and its
exactly.
releases and all the new features that are surprising we've received in there, because it's not like we've said, of course they're going to get these features
Yeah.
because they don't really tell us that. Not that far ahead, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. Just with the so if you've got a load of companies that've got PfSense routers in their businesses and that sort of thing, is it what sort of thing do you use to manage them? So obviously with Unify you've got the cloud, you've either got Hostify, you've either got cloud
Right.
controllers sort of thing. Is there anything like that for PfSense or?
There's not, and I've told people people make a bigger deal about it, I think, than it is. There's tools out there. If you need something that has a management dashboard to manage everything, then don't go with PfSense. That's
Yeah.
actually a video I've had. I have a video idea list, and one of the videos is called PfSense for MSPs. And I'm just going to cover the basics. It's going to be a shorter video, but I'm going to tell people, one of the first things I say, there is no central management. The fact that there's not central management is sometimes the deal stopper for people, and that's fine if that's your use case. PfSense releases only happen a couple times a year. So a couple times a year, you have to log into all of your clients' firewalls and do the update. There's not updates to really do in between unless there's an application that you're using on the client you need to update, and then you can log in and do those. As far as
Yeah.
monitoring goes, you can monitor them with SNMP, with whatever other tooling you want, and that's usually done internally. We have an RMM tool that we use to manage all of our clients' Windows computers, so we can just throw SNMP and monitor them that way, and that's been the way
Yeah.
we've been moving towards. An alternative method is using Zabbix on there, but then you got to maintain all the Zabbix connections and Zabbix updates, and if you already have a tool, I'm not big on adding more things to manage. It's a whole lot of people will brag about the 50 different services they set up. As a business owner and a bunch of employees, they do not want to check 50 dashboards for things. So you try to do consolidation so you can manage things at a more predictable rate. So there are ways you can manage and monitor the systems, but as far as the mass updating of them, it's just a project we do. We have all the clients with them. We start logging in and we start updating them. It's really as simple as that to us. Go in each one, hit update, hit yes, make sure it worked, move on to the next one. It becomes a project and a punch list just to run down and do all those. So, I like to click one button and update them all, but I don't know, that always is a little scary because you almost want to monitor them and have a plan in place before you update them. Because this goes for, whether you believe it or not, you get into the Meraki world or some of those other, well-managed, fully dashboard systems. Sometimes they don't come back up either. And you just don't hear about it as much because it's not as much public facing, but there was a couple updates that came out for different brands that, well, they didn't go well. You had to roll back. So you still have to have that same plan in place. It's not as automated and orchestrated as we'd like it to be.
I remember when I used to work at a WISP, we had probably 4,000 or 5,000 Ubiquiti devices on the network, and we'd very rarely use the mass update tool. So we'd be very careful about updating stuff. Even some of the extremely important backhaul links, we'd literally log in the middle of the night and then sit with it like a baby and make sure it all goes fine. So I can see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, and that's the reality of it. There's this concept that people who are thinking about how things scale, and there's the reality of someone who's worked at somewhere with a few thousand devices, and you're like, oh no, we don't just press update to a few thousand devices because nobody's got time for that many tickets that could potentially open, because if the first few updates don't go well, the next few thousand may not go well, and you don't want to have to go out and go on site to several thousand locations to push a new firmware and load it. You slowly, iteratively test. You figure out, like, all right, here's all the people with this particular model. Let's start there, and you go through. Great. Because sometimes you'll find a quirk with a specific model or device. Like, all right, we already know before we do this one, these are the conditions that might be met to make sure that the update goes well. So there's always that little quirkiness that you have to be on the lookout for. So that's my other argument for people. Well, how do you manage it? I'm like, how do you manage it when it's connected all to a device? You really just push update to a few thousand devices? You're braver than me.
Yeah, it's can be a bit risky. I remember there's some updates for some bizarre brand of like licensed backhaul radio we used to use, that there was one update which completely broke it, and you had to go on site and actually take it apart and do things. That can't happen very often. So
Right, right.
it's scary sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah, that's why you can be so careful on all these testing on there.
yeah,
So yeah, we just mainly like we literally just have them all in a spreadsheet. We'll have the version on there, and the version's always the latest. And eventually it's not, because a new version comes out, and you just run down the
yeah,
list. It's a task assigned to a staff member to organize and coordinate when we can do them. We have notes on any customers. Some customers, anytime after the business closes at 5 or 6 is fine. Some customers are 24/7. You have to schedule those for the weekends when you can find a window. So you figure out when their windows are, and you start punching through them.
yeah. Makes sense.
And sometimes how the tech is, it's just a brute force. You're just going to run through and hit update a lot.
Yeah. The other thing I had on my list was the I know you guys. I don't think you've mentioned it in more recent videos, but the Unified Protect stuff.
Yeah.
So are you still doing that for customers as
So
like
the
an
challenge
install?
has become really, can you even get it? And that's where there's a hang up. It's out of stock a lot. The cameras are out of stock. Do I think it's a good
Mhm.
product? Yeah, I still use it. We actually have a system set up at our shop we use. And we have a handful of clients that still are using it that really like it. They like the ease of use. I like the features that's been added to it. I thought about doing a more updated video on there. The
Mm.
downside is its inflexibility. You either like the features it has or you don't, and you can't
Mhm.
expand or add more. Now, when you get into larger businesses that have compliance, they have to keep, let's say, 90 days or longer, archiving and things like that. This is where Ubiquiti really falls short, because you can only use the drives in it officially. Yes, someone's going to point out, but Tom, you can SSH in and create backup copies of things and stuff like that, but it's not great. If you look at the other solutions, one of the popular ones we talk about a lot on our channel is going to be Synology. They have lots of really solid features. I don't think they're quite as easy to use as Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti has done such a wonderful job that's, I like
Mhm.
handing a non-technical user a Ubiquiti camera system is actually pretty easy, because they're going to go, oh, I get this. I can scroll through this and figure it out.
Yeah, definitely.
A little bit of training they may need on there, but we've even found most of the time, when there's an incident, they just call us anyways. We just had someone that had an incident in one of their buildings. Even though it's Ubiquiti, they just said, I ain't got time for this. Just, I'll pay you guys whatever it takes. Pull the video. Here's the timestamp for when I need video. And so that's more the reality.
Okay.
And the same thing with the
Yeah.
Synology camera systems. A lot of times, even I think they're relatively easy to use, but we frequently, because we just aren't really familiar with them, people are like, all right, this is one that we think the event happened. Please pull this footage for us. But the Synologies are really nice. You get the more flexibility in terms of the wide variety of cameras. I can use, I think they brag about having like 2,000 or 3,000 different camera models. They
Wow.
support, basically they support all the open standards. So as long as the camera supports open standard, but this also gives you the option of when you come into bid a business, you have existing cameras. Rip and replace is awesome until someone gets the bill for it. They go, no, I'm not ready to replace these 100 cameras in my building. I just need a new recorder system and 10 new cameras. Well, all right, cool. We can do an integration with their old cameras. This is something Ubiquiti does not and will not ever support. People always ask about it, and like, they like, Ubiquiti doesn't have license fees. I'm like, well, technically they rolled it all into the cost of the device. So, because their cameras are higher cost than other brand cameras, because there's a license fee buried in there somewhere. There's a development fee to
Yeah.
maintain the project
Like,
buried into the cost of the camera. So I still think it's a great product. I really like some of the new cameras they came out with. I think are really cool.
mm.
But man, getting a hold of them, like, that's just a challenge in general, getting buying those, especially what was that small Wi-Fi one they had? I loved it, but
The G3 Instant was like 30 quid, $30. Yeah.
yeah, great
Yeah.
price. You just can't, you gotta, keep a watch out for them. You can't, if I want to buy 10 of them right now, I can't, unless I want to
No,
pay
hard.
eBay scalper prices.
Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff that they've done in the last, I want to say the last 12 months, I think. Got the stacking, the NVR Pro stacking feature. You got the AI 360 camera.
Yep.
There's AI Bullet as well. There's quite a lot of stuff that's just sort of ever so slowly expanding, and
Yeah, but it comes
quite
down
nice.
to I didn't look today, but I know not that long ago, the UNVR Pros were just not in stock. So cool, you have stacking. I can't buy two of them to stack because they're
Yeah,
just the lack of availability of the product. And I mean, there's availability problems with everything because of supply chain issues, but more readily available are the different Synologies. Now there'll be like a certain model Synology I can't get in, and we'll just substitute for something close enough. Maybe we have to. We had a couple times people. I told them it's six to 9 months. It says before this one's in stock, or in 3 weeks I can have you this model that's only like $200 more. So sometimes people think we're always trying to upsell. I'm like, no, I just if you can find it, we'll let you buy it. We'll just configure it for
yeah.
you. I tell people because supply chain issues are always a pain.
Can you use the Ubiquiti cameras with the Synology or not?
You can set it up for RTSP, so it'll work, but it's not great. I wouldn't recommend it. So if
Okay,
you were in a desperate situation, yes. Would I recommend it? Not at all. They don't
fair
work
enough.
as well.
No, what's that? There's a standard, isn't there? There's like I can't remember what it's called.
ONVI, ONVIF, I think
That's
is
it.
how it's said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's that the one that the Synology uses, is it?
Yeah. Yep, they're
Okay.
using standards. They're not the only one that uses it, and that's what's nice about a standard is you can come in and swap out cameras and things like that. And Synology, since they went to version 9, has gotten really cool on all that stuff. They've got better bulk importing, which is awesome. So you can bulk manage and bulk import cameras because we have a lot of large camera jobs we've done with them. And they've had stacking
Yeah.
forever, which is one of those things like Ubiquiti. Why didn't you bake this into the product at the beginning? Because stacking and tying a bunch of NVRs together, this is common with a lot of the other commercial NVRs out there.
I know that was one of the original concerns that people had with the Protect system was the when it first launched, the only thing you could run it on was that Gen 2 Plus Cloud Key, and people
Yeah.
were saying they were like panicking, saying I can't run all these hundreds of cameras on it. I could do that with Unify Video and that sort of thing. So it's yeah, you're right. They should have done it. They should have done that from the start, really. But
Yeah, they were really slow because when they dropped the original camera product, which by the way, I know people are still using it, and they really need to make sure that's not publicly exposed because they killed the
mhm.
cloud server, so you can't relay through it anymore. You don't want to publicly expose it because it's unpatched for log4j. It's using that in the background, and it is arbitrary. There's some proof of concept code out there that will pull exploits on it, and yeah, those systems, we don't have any clients on them. We had, unfortunately, we sold a lot of clients those. So we ended up, to support our clients better, we offered them steep discounts where we had them almost like just buying some of the hardware so we could swap out some of those NVRs. But it took a long time because some clients, there's nothing we could do until the UNVR Pro came out because they just had too many cameras. Like you said, the first one was the Cloud Key before the UNVR, and then the UNVR Pro. When we have people with 20 cameras, you're not doing it on a Cloud Key, and I'm not putting half a dozen Cloud Keys in either because that's not manageable either.
No, no. The stacking thing from the release notes, it says it will come to the 4-bay one
Yeah,
at some
that's
point.
what I'm waiting
But
for it to come to that.
yeah,
Because we have a 4-bay one and we have a Pro in our lab, and I wanted to get those stacked together, and I'm gonna hopefully see if they'll support that, if they'll support mix matching. That would be kind of
they
cool.
haven't mentioned that, but
I
that'd
know
be quite
that's the
nice. Yeah,
it's literally the only way we're going to find out is if we try, because you're right,
yeah.
it's not mentioned unless they implicitly say you can't do that. So we'll
Shouldn't be any
just
reason why
cross
I
our
wouldn't have
fingers
thought.
and
But yeah.
hopefully they have an ability to do that.
Yeah, there are some weird things I've read, like certain. So if one camera gets adopted to the secondary NVR, for example, you can't move it, and then the viewport doesn't work properly with either. Something weird going on. So it's released but not quite properly done, I don't think. So
And if an enterprising security individual wants to poke at it, if you looked at the way they're doing Bluetooth auto adoption of APs, that's interesting. And I feel like there's a static key somewhere that might be able to be exploited. I haven't had time to really poke at it, but if you look, it does, and this does it because of the Unify sensor works on
yeah,
Bluetooth, and it relays through, but auto adopts any of them in there. So when we were setting things up in our lab and moving them around for customers, we realized that any of the Unify 6 that had the Bluetooth, I think it's the BLE modes on them, stayed adopted to our device, and we didn't tell them to adopt. It auto adopted them.
oh
There's a way to turn it off, but the fact
yeah,
that it can auto adopt tells me there's probably a static key somewhere. And
yeah,
I'm
that
wondering, I
makes
have a
sense.
security researcher I want to reach out to, and I'll even send them the device. I'm like, can you poke at this? Because I'm not sure exactly how key exchange works on Bluetooth. I've never really dove deep into it, but I bet there's a flaw in there somewhere where it's got to be a static key because it auto joins. And once it joins, it locks. So it may be a static key that gets swapped, but how many times are you going to be able to get on a network? And what if you could exploit this? I don't know. I kind of going off on a tangent with it, but I think it's kind of a novel thing to poke at.
Yeah, I'm not really that good at security stuff, but it sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the fact that you can do it just by being on the same network, like the devices are on the same network, and it just says, "I'll adopt you," and it does. So that's strange.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I think we'll wrap it up. I think. So yeah, it's coming up to about 40 minutes. So
yeah.
Cool. Thank you for joining me for. Yeah, it's been really good to talk to you, Tom. Yeah, this is the third episode of Creator Spotlight. So if people want to find out more about Lawrence Systems, where can they go to?
Easiest place to find me, everything starts at my website, lawrencesystems.com. Of course, you can always look up Lawrence Systems on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at TomLawrenceTech. Those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me, and my forums. If you have questions and things like that, I try to consolidate because people ask the same questions all the time. So I always try to consolidate those to the forum so they're very well indexed. Matter of fact, my staff laughs when when they're searching for how to set something up and there's a forum post that I did a whole write-up and tutorial, because a lot of times I'll have an accompanying forum post with the video where I may have all the commands I used and things like that. Because it comes back to someone we started with here. When you want to create things, you want to show people how to do them and teach them. I can show you in a video, but I think it's better when you can copy and paste the commands as well. So
definitely, yeah, cool. I'll put the links to your website and all the social stuff in the YouTube description, so that's fine.
Awesome, thank you. Great chatting.
All right, cool. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Cheers.